Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now we have a bowl rematch from last year in the Music City Bowl between two teams that really struggle to put up points, and some people think could be the lowest scoring bowl game of the year, between the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Kentucky Wildcats. Who do I think is going to win this bowl game? Let's break it down. Now Iowa's 7-5 and 5-4 in the Big Ten this season, and Kirk Ferentz, he's the longest tenured head coach in college football, and he's done a really solid job as the Iowa head coach, but he's really struggled to get Iowa to be one of the top Big Ten teams. They've just been a really consistent 8-4 program. Last year they went 10-4 and made it to the Big Ten championship game, but this year they took a bit of a step back and went 7-5. But they still had a decent season overall, but their offense really struggled. And in week 1, Iowa beat South Dakota State 7-3, and that was the first game in 20 years that a team had two safeties and a field goal to reach 7 points. And Iowa got the win, and a win is a win, but their offense really struggled to start the season. Then they lost to their rivals Iowa State at home 10-7, and that's the first time they've lost to Iowa State in many years. And then they beat Nevada 27-0. That was a good bounce back game. Their offense did play better in that one. Then they won at Rutgers 27-10. Then they lost to Michigan 27-14. Then they lost at Illinois 9-6, and again their offense regressed in that game. Then they lost at Ohio State 54-10, so they were not competitive against the upper echelon of the Big Ten. But then they bounced back and beat Northwestern 33-13. That was a good win. Then they won at Purdue 24-3 in one of Iowa's best performances of the season. Then they beat Wisconsin 24-10, and that was a good one as well. Then they won at Minnesota 13-10, and Iowa had a good stretch of games there, and their defense played really well, and their offense came alive a little bit. But in the final game of the regular season, they lost to Nebraska 24-17 at home in a game that they should have probably won, but they made a lot of mistakes, and that was a tough way to end the regular season. They still had a solid season overall, going 7-5, but if you're Iowa, you wanted to do better than that, especially because your defense played so well, but your offense just really struggled. And in this bowl game, quarterback Joe Labus, he's going to be playing in his first game ever for Iowa because quarterback Spencer Petras is injured, and their backup quarterback Alex Padilla is in the transfer portal. So Joe Labus is going to have to step up in this bowl game. We don't know what he's going to be able to provide for Iowa's offense, but as long as he's mistake-free, it would definitely give Iowa a good chance to win this bowl game, especially with how good Iowa's defense is. And running back Caleb Johnson had 142 attempts for 762 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 27 receiving yards. He's been one of the biggest bright spots for Iowa this year. He's a solid running back. He's a freshman, and he has a lot of room to improve. And if he has a good game in this bowl game, it will definitely help Iowa win. And Iowa's top offensive threat, tight end Sam Laporta, had 53 receptions for 601 yards and a touchdown. He had a fantastic season from the tight end spot for Iowa, and Iowa's always put out great tight ends, and Sam Laporta will probably follow Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson's footsteps and go to the NFL. But he's playing in this bowl game, and if Joe Labus, at quarterback, can just get the ball to him, it will really help out Iowa's offense because Sam Laporta is a great tight end. And wide receiver Nico Reganey had 32 receptions for 365 yards and a touchdown. He's a solid wide receiver for Iowa. If he was on another football team, he probably would have more yards than he did. But again, with Iowa's offense really struggling, his numbers look worse than they should. But Nico Reganey is a solid wide receiver. And tight end Luke Lachey has 25 receptions for 362 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's a great complementary tight end to Sam Laporta, and Luke Lachey could go to the NFL as well if he keeps playing the way he is next year. And on the defense side of the ball, linebacker Jack Campbell has 115 total tackles, 51 solo tackles, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. He's a fantastic linebacker. He has an NFL future, and he is all over the field for Iowa. Linebacker Seth Benson has 84 total tackles, 36 solo tackles, a sack, and interception, of fumble recovery. And defensive back Cooper DeJean has 68 total tackles, 53 solo tackles, 4 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns that he returned off those picks. And Iowa's defense has been fantastic all season. If it wasn't for their defense, they would have lost many more games this year because Iowa's offense has really struggled. Now on the Kentucky side, they're 7-5 and 3-5 in the SEC this season, and Mark Stoops, he's done a really good job of turning the Kentucky program around. Before he was there, Kentucky really struggled as a program, but he has really built them up and made them into one of the better SEC teams. They were 10-3 last year and had a great season with a bowl win at the end of the season, beating Iowa. But this year they stepped back to 7-5, so they can get to 8-5 with another bowl win over Iowa. But still, it was a step back from where they were last year. But they still had a solid season overall compared to where Kentucky used to be. Kentucky started the season off with a 37-13 win over Miami, Ohio. That was a good win. Then they won at Florida 26-16, and Florida was coming off that Utah win. So Kentucky winning at Florida like that really made it look like Kentucky was going to have a fantastic season. But it turns out Florida wasn't as good as people thought, and Kentucky didn't really have the season a lot of Kentucky fans were hoping for, but they still had a solid season anyway. But they beat Youngstown State 31-0. Then they beat Northern Illinois 31-23. But then they lost at Ole Miss 22-19. That was a tough loss. They had a chance to win the game, but they fumbled the ball. in the red zone at the end, and they fell short. Then they lost to South Carolina at home 24-14. And Will Levis, their starting quarterback, he did get banged up in some of these games as well, and that also is what hurt Kentucky's season. Maybe if he was healthy all year, they might have had a better season as well. And then they beat Mississippi State 27-17, and that was with Will Levis returning, and they played much better and actually show what Kentucky football could be this year. But then they lost at Tennessee 44-6. They were not competitive at all. Yes, Tennessee had a great season, and Hendon Hooker was still playing for Tennessee, but that was a tough loss. And they won at Missouri 21-17. That was a pretty good win. But then they lost to Vanderbilt at home 24-21. They should not have lost this game. Vanderbilt is an improved football team, but Kentucky should have won. But then they lost to Georgia 16-6. They kept it a lower scoring game, but Kentucky could not get anything going on offense. But then they beat Louisville 26-13, the rivals, in the final game of the regular season. That was a good bounce back win to end the season at a solid 7-5 and make a bowl game. And quarterback Will Levis is opting out for the draft. He is not playing in this game. So quarterback Destin Wade will be playing in his first game ever for Kentucky, just like Iowa has a new quarterback as well. So Destin Wade is going to have to play well in this bowl game if Kentucky wants to win, not make a lot of mistakes, not turn the ball over. He is a dual threat quarterback, so we'll have to see what he can do. Kentucky also has fired their offensive coordinator, so they're going to have an interim offensive coordinator in this bowl game, so that's going to make things interesting for Kentucky as well. And running back Tom McClain is 49 attempts for 238 yards, 93 receiving yards, and a touchdown. He's going to be starting in this bowl game for the first time for Kentucky as well, because their top two running backs, Chris Rodriguez and Kaviasi Smoke, are both out in this bowl game because Chris Rodriguez is opted out and Kaviasi Smoke is in the transfer portal. So Kentucky's going to have a new starting running back, so that's going to make things tough on their offense. And wide receiver Barian Brown has 45 receptions for 604 yards and 4 touchdowns. Wide receiver Dane Key has 31 receptions for 472 yards and 6 touchdowns. And wide receiver Tavion Robinson has 35 receptions for 470 yards and 3 touchdowns. And on the defense side of the ball, linebacker De'Aaron Jackson has 61 total tackles and 23 solo tackles. And defensive back Jordan Lovett has 59 total tackles, 34 solo tackles, and 2 interceptions. And Kentucky's defense has played well all season. They've helped them win a lot of games. Their offense, when Will Levis was healthy, was much better than when he was out. So Kentucky's offense, we're not going to know really how good they're going to be in this bowl game. But if Kentucky's defense can play well like they have all season, they will have a chance to win this bowl game. So who do I think is going to win the Music City Bowl? This is probably going to be one of the lowest scoring bowl games, if not the lowest scoring bowl game of the 2022 bowl season, because both teams were already struggling on offense this season, but now that both teams are not at full strength, it makes it even worse. And especially Iowa's offense has struggled this season because Kirk Ferentz, at offensive coordinator, just runs a very vanilla offense, and he has some decent players to run better plays, but they just do not do anything on offense that surprises people. But what makes it even worse is that they do have a third-string quarterback playing in this bowl game for the first time, and that's going to be tough for them to navigate. I think that if Iowa can limit mistakes on offense and run the ball and keep the ball for most of the game, then I think they have a good chance to win, because Iowa's defense, we know how good Iowa's defense is. Their defense is better than Kentucky's by a decent amount. They've been fantastic all season. Iowa's in this bowl game because of their defense. They play well all season. They get to the quarterback. They get interceptions. They tackle well. And Iowa's defense will play well in this game. They're going to do everything they can to win. It's going to come down for Iowa that they can't make mistakes, and they're going to have to control the clock. But on the Kentucky side, even though Will Levis is out, and that's really tough for Kentucky because when he's been out, their offense has really suffered. Destin Wade, their dual threat quarterback that's playing in his first game for Kentucky in this bowl game, he can't make mistakes either. He's going to have to play a solid game. He can't turn it over. And if Kentucky's able to control the clock on offense and get things going on the ground, then they can win this game. Because Kentucky's defense is solid as well. It might not be as good as Iowa's, but they've done a pretty solid job in the SEC of stopping a lot of teams this year. And that's really helped Kentucky win a lot of games. And their performance has really helped Kentucky make this bowl game. So I think this game's going to come down to who controls the clock better, who does not turn the ball over more, and who makes more mistakes. Because the team that makes more mistakes, like a pick six or a fumble recovery for a touchdown, can really change this game either way, because both these teams are not going to be able to come back from a big deficit because their offenses really struggle. But I'm going to go with Kentucky to beat Iowa 14-10 in the Music City Bowl. I think Kentucky just has a little bit more offense than Iowa. I think Destin Wade, with his dual threat ability, is going to be able to do some things on offense, and I think that Kentucky's going to mix things up with their new offensive coordinator that's in this bowl game as an intern. I think Kentucky's going to do some trick plays. They're going to be able to run the ball fairly well. Even though Iowa's defense is really good at stopping the run, Kentucky has run the ball fairly well this season, and Tom McClain is a decent running back. I think Kentucky's defense is going to play well in this game. They're going to be able to stop an Iowa offense that doesn't really do much to begin with, and I think that quarterback Joe Lavis, maybe he can show some things and be able to control the clock, and Iowa will be able to run the ball, make this a low possession game where there's not a lot of possessions on either side, and Iowa can control the clock. Then I think Iowa can win this game, and I think that Iowa's defense will be able to slow down Kentucky, because Kentucky's going to have some issues on offense as well. But I think Kentucky's going to be able to put up a little bit more points and yards than Iowa. I think that Kentucky's defense is going to play well and stop Iowa's offense just enough. Kirk Ferentz, he has a solid team even though their offense has struggled all season. But I think Mark Stoops' team, it just has a little bit more on both sides of the ball. And I think they're going to come up fired up to play. And I think that Kentucky's going to beat Iowa for the second year in a row in a bowl game. And I'm going to go with Kentucky to beat Iowa 14-10 in the Music City Bowl. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below whether you think Kentucky or Iowa is going to win this bowl game and why. And I will see you next time.